Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1422A, and today's date is November 10th, 2017, and the title of the episode is, Are the Rich and Elite Panicking About Protecting Their Wealth? Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Well, it's starting to look like everything is hitting at once here. Now, we talked about Venezuela. We knew they weren't making their payments. And we can see at this point, Venezuela officially declared in default. The Wilmington Trust, the trustee of the 8.5% bonds due 2018, issued by Corpolec, Venezuela's electricity company, declared that they missed interest payment originally due on October 10th and whose 30-day grace period expired on November 9th, and for which no payment was sent or received, officially constitutes as a default. And we're going to see, and we're going to have to see where this all goes from this point. And we can see at this time that it's not just Venezuela. And we know there's a lot of pressure on Venezuela from the U.S. and the cabal, where they're putting a lot of pressure on Venezuela because they've been wanting to get into Venezuela to capture their natural resources, which is oil, just like they've done in the Middle East. And at this point, they're putting a lot of pressure on them, and it's making it very difficult for the people. And every time the cabal puts pressure on a country, it's a lot of pressure on the people of the country, because the sanctions and everything else, the people really lose out. But what we're seeing right now is that the entire global economic system, it's starting to break down in many different areas, and we're seeing it in many different areas, and it's all not going to show up at once. It will show up at once when everything starts to implode at the same time. But what happens, just like it happened back in 2008, we see little pockets here and there, and what they do, it's almost like a dam which is bursting. A pinhole opens up, you put, some putty on it, you try to fix it, another pinhole opens up, you try to fix that one, then another one opens up, it gets bigger, and before you know it, you just can't fix it, and the whole thing starts to crack, and the whole dam it basically cracks apart, falls apart, and the water rushes through. This is what we are seeing right now. If we look at the United Kingdom, and we talked about retail sales, we talked about inflation there, and also retail employment, we are seeing things are really breaking down there. Now, the CBI reported their retail sales. And what they're reporting is that the retail sales in the UK, well, they have crashed by 5.2%. And they're saying that this is the most horrific October they've seen. It is the worst month since right before the Brexit in April of 2016. And remember, they haven't really left the EU yet. They're still in there. So nothing has really changed. And what we're seeing is that consumers, they have resisted spending in October because what has happened? Inflation. They saw the consumer price index rise by 3%. The confidence of individuals in the country is falling. Wages can't keep up with higher inflation, with higher mortgage payments, with higher automobile payments, with higher food costs, and everything else. Fashion sales have plunged by 7.9% year on year. And this is the worst segment, but retailers aren't alone. Restaurant, pubs, bars, guess what? They're seeing the same exact thing. And we're starting to see this huge meltdown. Now remember, as retail melts down, people are going to lose their jobs in retail because stores are going to close. This is spreading across the globe, and we're seeing it in many different areas. And after this holiday season, it is just going to get worse. But the cabal, the central bankers, they don't want people to know that things are drastically changing to the downside. So what they do is they try to manipulate everything to keep everyone in the dark, distracted from what's really going on. So while all this was breaking down and things were happening out in the Middle East and all this other stuff, we can see that they, or someone, dumped 38,000 gold contracts in 8 minutes. And they smashed the silver price down also. And all of a sudden, everything just went down. And this was around 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it ended at 11:16 a.m. And this was worth about $4.9 million worth of gold. And we can see at this point that they are trying to keep gold very low. They don't want it rising like the cryptocurrencies. That's a free market. This is why we're seeing these ups and downs. And when we step back, we can see that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, they're continually moving up and up and up. If they allowed gold to do this, if they allowed gold to be in a free market, well, it would be a reflection on what is really going on in the economy, what is really happening with the dollar. And they don't want that to happen because guess what? The world, yes, I said the world would lose confidence in the dollar and it would come crashing down. All they're doing right now is putting Band-Aids over it, trying to pretend that everything is okay. But in the end, just like we've seen in the past, the whole thing's going to come tumbling down. Consumer confidence unexpectedly dropped, and we see it went from 100.7 down to 97.8. People are starting to realize that there are major, major problems, and we're going to see this accelerate because what we're seeing right now is that banks, they have started to tighten their lending standards for prime and subprime borrowers, and especially the automobile industry. They are going to be hit very, very hard. And what they're seeing now is that there's too much debt, there's too much negative equity in vehicles after years of this loosey-goosey lending. New vehicle prices, they've moved out of reach, and the banks and the central banks, they're starting to reel all this in. Now, why are they doing this at this point? Go back to 2007 and to 2008 when they started to raise interest rates and they started to cut back on who they were loaning money to. This is what they do when they're preparing to bring down the economy. They do it very slowly to make it look like, yeah, we have nothing to do with this. But if they do this, and they are doing it, the automobile market is going to take a very big hit because they depend on loans, because people don't walk into the dealership and say, hey, that car's $42,000, here's $42,000 in cash, I'll take it. I mean, they might have done this before when they were able to get equity loans because the houses around the area were appreciating, but now we're not seeing this anymore. And we can see that the automobile industry is going to have a very, very tough time. We see the cabal, they are not giving up on this one world government. We know that Trump, he got rid of the TPP, but we can see right now that the cabal's out there with 11 other countries trying to agree on the TPP, trying to keep this alive, because in their minds, and you have to remember the way they think that eventually they're going to hit their goal of getting everyone to sign on to the TPP, and this is why they're trying to keep it alive. And they have about 11 member nations where they found enough common ground on core elements to move forward on a final agreement. But again, it doesn't include the United States. And I don't think this is going to go anywhere at this point in time unless all of a sudden everything switches around and they gain control over everything and they get the United States to join the TPP. But at this point, I don't see this happening at all. And we need to understand is that the cabal, they're not going to give up, but they understand what is happening right now. The rich, the elite, the insiders, they realize what is happening right now. And what we're seeing is something very interesting. Now, we've been talking about the economy. We've been talking about protecting your wealth. And just don't think it's us who's looking at this and protecting our wealth with, where we're buying gold and silver and getting supplies and keeping cash on hand. Because what we're seeing right now is that European elites, they are hoarding cash. The Japanese are stuffing safes full of high denomination bills. The Saudis are scrambling, and we know what's going on there. We'll discuss that in a little bit. And the richest Americans are getting increasingly concerned about the safety of their wealth. And what is happening here is that they are hiring security services. Now, the demand for security services, it has soared, driving up wages around 24% year on year. And they're requesting more of these security services to protect their wealth. They're purchasing safes. They're storing their wealth in different areas, and they're being guarded. This should tell you something, that they know what is going on. They understand that something bad is about to happen. And this is why we're seeing it just not here in the United States. We're seeing it out in Europe. We're seeing it out in Japan. And if we really looked everywhere else, I'm sure we're going to see it everywhere else, because we also know that the elite were building homes in far-off places with their own landing strips, and they were being guarded there because we know what's happening here. The system is coming down. We're seeing signs of this all over the place. We see signs of it everywhere. We've been watching this for quite a while, and we've been watching it deteriorate all along. Now, a lot of people are in the dark. They think everything is fine. Well, everyone thought it was fine going back prior to 2008. Everyone thought this was great. They believed the Fed that, they're not forecasting any recession. Everything's contained. Don't worry about it. Your job is safe at Lehman. You don't have anything to worry about. And all those investments and your pension in the automobile industry with GM, don't worry about that either. Everything is just fine. Actually, back then, GM said they were doing marvelously well before everything came tumbling down. But then we learned that they were in so much debt that it was absolutely ridiculous. The same thing is happening now, and the insiders know. The elite, the wealthy, they know what's coming. They're prepared for it, and they realize they need to protect themselves. And this is why they've been hiring these security services. This is why they're paying them more to guard their wealth. You need to guard your wealth. You might not be able to pay for security, but you can keep cash on hand. You can keep gold and silver to ensure your wealth. You can keep food, water, supplies. And I'm not saying you need millions of dollars worth of gold and silver. Whatever you can do, you can take some of your dollars. You can buy junk silver. You can buy just silver. I've been buying just silver lately. You can do all of these things to protect your wealth, because once the manipulation stops, once the new system is online, and even before that, you're going to see gold and silver completely repriced. You're going to see it completely different than you've seen it before. And if you go back to the 29, 30, 31, 32, when we had the Great Depression, those individuals that kept their gold, those individuals that kept their silver, that didn't hand it over to the government, guess what? When the government got as much as they needed, the gold and the silver, actually more gold than anything else, they repriced it. I think they went from, $25 up to $35 an ounce. And those people who kept their gold, guess what? Their wealth just jumped. The same thing is going to happen here. And think about it. They've been manipulating gold quite a bit, keeping it very, very low. I believe, and I think many others also believe, that gold should be where Bitcoin is, or even above that. So we can see right now, they understand something is about to happen. They understand that something is coming down the road here, and they're getting prepared and ready. And they're making sure that they have their wealth. They're making sure that it's guarded. You need to do the same. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.